everyone. Welcome back to Muse. This is Hannah Fletcher, and I am speaking with Abby Geoghegan from Only Murders in the Building. I love this show so much. Congratulations on obviously continuing to have such a great success with the show. I want to start with, what was it like when you found out that you had the opportunity to return and work with so many wonderful people on this show, on the costumes?
I mean, every season is like, since season one, every time we get casting and just get to go back and continue to tell the story with this team that we have in place, but then also the cast, it's a dream come true. Honestly, the whole job is for all of us. Everybody on the crew says the exact same thing. It's like, how did we get here? And like, how are we this lucky? The job is an absolute dream, and every day it's kind of just pinching yourself that you are here.
I bet you guys do such a great job too. Like, honestly, when I first started getting into the show myself, that obviously the costumes really stood out to me. And I know that obviously costuming is very important for sure in any project, especially in film and TV. But there was just something about the costuming that you guys did with this particular show and this particular cast in general that just really stood out to me. And I just want to make it clear that, like, I appreciate it so much.
Thank
Um,
you.
of course. I would love to hear about your experiences. You've been collaborating with a bunch of new guest stars this season. We have
Mhm.
Ashley Park, Meryl Streep, Paul Rudd, Jesse Williams, and the fans are obviously so excited to see all of these people coming on to this season. Talk to me about your experience with collaborating with them and getting them all dolled up, obviously, for their roles.
Yeah, I mean, this season, obviously, we had a giant new cast. It was the first time we really had like a whole new cast and like entirely new cast almost. And the way that all the process sort of started with them is, so Dana Covarrubias, she's our head costume designer. She goes through and she sets a sort of theme for the season. And every season is a different one. And this season we went with, because the show is about Broadway this year, we went with musicals. And so both the Broadway musicals and then ones that were also films. And we spent a few days, Dana spent like weeks just watching old musicals to get inspiration. And then myself and the other assistant designer, she and I didn't watch quite as many as Dana did, but we all spent a lot of time just like looking at images from all these musicals. And then, so that was our bait, that was our sort of jumping off point. And then with the new cast, the very, very early on in the process of prep, Dana met with Meryl Streep and John Hoffman, our showrunner, for a meeting just about Loretta and who she is and what Meryl's thoughts were about Loretta. And then they developed the character from there. And we do that a lot with some of the actors. We're incredibly fortunate that the cast we have is the cast we have, but they're also incredible collaborators, like behind the scenes, in prep, in fittings. They're all just the most fun people to work with. They all come in with ideas and are open to, trying stuff and seeing what where the character goes with their clothes. And which is always, obviously, it's a dream for us. Because we have an idea of the character and that we've figured out and discussed with the directors and then John and each other. And then to have the actors add another level to that is always just such a privilege. And it helps us really get to the place that you see on screen. It's just, they're all the best. I mean, they're just, I can't say enough good things about all of them. Like, it's just too much fun.
That's so sweet. I love that. Obviously, I love that I can tell it's like emanating from you, obviously, how much obviously you love your job, but having worked with such wonderful people and being able to like dress them. That's another thing I feel like that people don't really think about in terms of like the costuming aspect. Like, it's kind of an intimate process because like you're taking measurements, you're trying things on, you're taking Meryl Streep probably by the arm and showing her to the director and saying, what do you like? What don't you like? What do you need to go and work on? So I love that you clearly have such a great connection with those that obviously you've had the opportunity to work with, especially in terms of the cast as well. I think that's iconic. I'm so excited.
Yeah, they're Yeah, every time anybody talks about the cast, we're just sort of like, yep, it's wild. Like,
Yeah.
because yeah, it's not, that part isn't lost on us even after working
Oh,
with
I'm
them. It's like
sure.
it's still they're still icons, and and there's no really way to forget that, or you know.
No, that's remarkable. I'm curious to ask you, one of the things, like you mentioned, this season really does have a musical theater aspect that contrasts to the previous two, which obviously did not. What does the musical theater aspect look like when it comes to the costume design? Obviously, like I'm just going to take a guess and then you can kind of tell me where I land with
Mhm.
this. But I mean, I've seen Wicked on Broadway and everything like that. And I mean, the costumes are very often, in my opinion, like larger than life, obviously, even if it's something dull and drab, like a Cinderella pre-makeover,
Right.
pre fairy godmother, it's still going to be something that stands out very much so to capture that audience's attention. So what were the challenges, the trials, the tribulations, the successes when it came to developing these costumes to encapsulate that like musical theater tone, if that makes sense?
So I think the biggest challenge for us was to ground it in the reality of the show, right? So the
Mhm.
show Death Rattle Dazzle started as a straight play called Death Rattle.
Mhm.
And when Oliver gets the idea to make it into a musical, he's not, the producers aren't really giving him any more money. They're not saying like, okay, fine, this is a great idea. They're still very hesitant about it. So when that happened, our thinking, just sort of staying in the reality of the show, was that he wouldn't really have had the money to fully redo the costumes for the show.
Mhm.
Um, that said, what existed in sort of a straight drama doesn't have the dazzle to it.
Right.
So what we sort of made up as the reality of Death Rattle to Death Rattle Dazzle
Mhm.
was that he essentially has, a costume designer friend or friend from, his former Broadway days. And so he had them sort of do him a favor and just kind of put a little bit of sparkle onto the clothes that are already there.
Mhm.
So we took, and again, we only really saw 3 costumes in the straight play. So we saw Ben's detective outfit, and we saw Charles's constable, and then we saw Loretta's nanny. And so we took those. The only one that's very different is Charles's constable goes from a trench coat and suit to just a straight, yeah, well, straight, like goes to a very sparkly police officer's uniform. So yeah, I mean, that was the within the world of the show, that was our thinking. But then for us to really get the reality of a musical on camera, it's,
Right.
the challenge there is to not go too far, um, but to go pretty far, because in the world of our show, it's, reality is pretty heightened anyway.
Right. It makes sense at that point.
Yeah, and Oliver, and it's Oliver, so
Right.
his inclination is to always go a little too far. So we knew we were doing a musical from the very beginning of the season. We were told that like really early on, heads up, by the end of the show, we are going to produce this musical. Um, we didn't know a lot about what the storyline was or how much we were going to see of it. So we started with sketches, and it was a huge collaboration between our team at the Owners and the Building Costume Department, our props department, and then outside vendors. We worked with an illustrator and stuff, and in a couple of different costume houses in New York, Boston, all over the place. We just found these incredible artists to work with to build everything, and it was, it was a blast. We had so much fun.
That's
That was so much fun. Like just putting all of us, like putting hand sequining and hand rhinestoning shoes and hat bands, and um, really just making it exactly what we wanted.
That's iconic. I love to hear obviously that like collaborative effort. Also, what I think is just really great is like you mentioned, you got to play with that balance of like, well, this world on TV is already larger than life, but then how can we got to make it big, but we can't make it too big. I just think that these
Right.
are really fun challenges. I also I'm glad to hear on your all's behalf that you had the opportunity to know that going into this season, you had a heads up, because I'm sure
Yeah.
that that is 10 times more taxing and tricky than even just the normal season, which again, the reality of the show is larger than life anyway. So I'm sure that
Yeah.
that poses a challenge in and of itself, much less adding on this musical theater component as well.
Yeah, we having notice in episodic
Yeah,
television is not a thing that we're very used
exactly.
to. You know, we're again on this show, we are pretty fortunate to have at the very least outlines of scripts early. So we do have a sense of what's coming, just in general, but they knew they had to kind of give us, and you know, the art department and their production design team a heads up that, you know, we were going to have to, they were going to have to build a whole set, and we were going to, that was functional.
Mm,
And, you know, we were going to have this whole, you know, ensemble musical to deal with. So,
definitely. I love that. Well, before I let you go, I do have one more question for you. I'm curious to ask, especially when it comes to, I love being able to interview you and you being in the costume realm of things. I think that more interviews like this need to exist, because I think that it really opens it up and opens up that dialogue. So what is a piece of advice that you would give to somebody who might be looking to break into the costume side of things? What have you learned along the way, and what would you say to encourage others to continue to come into this space?
I think, I mean, for me, it's not trying to move too fast. I think, you know, with, especially with like social media and things like that, people tend to want to get to the next step very quickly. And I
Yes.
think for me, it was, being a PA, like being a costume PA on a television show,
Mhm.
was the best learning experience of my life. Like any job I had, I just would try so hard to soak up all the information that I could, that I, you know, that I could get. And it's hard. It's a hard job. Being a costume PA is an incredibly hard
Yes.
job. It's a lot of physical labor. It's typically pretty thankless work. Um, but once you get through it, like once, but doing it is important. And I think it's important to have that experience when you reach a stage in your career where, you know, you're an assistant or you're a designer, um, because you know how the whole, you've seen how the whole process works, um, from being a PA and then, you know, to a coordinator or working on set or however, whatever anybody, whatever your final goal is. But
Mhm.
I think to really just, when you get the opportunities to work on a show in a costume department or in a costume shop anywhere that's costume related, to just be a little sponge and just try to soak up all the information that, you know, you can, and just, you know, quietly observing or, you know, taking little notes down. I like would write stuff down all the time. um
Mm.
and yeah, just to really get everything you can out of the early days, and the, you know, the doing returns and the packing boxes and the unpacking boxes and the organizing things, those days, to really just, yeah, to try and absorb everything you can from that experience, because it does serve you so well later.
I'm sure. I love that so much. I went to a liberal arts college myself, and we had to go and learn different aspects of everything. So I remember doing like the costuming hours that I had to fulfill in order to meet my criteria to graduate. I thought it was so interesting. It was like I was like I could never, like my brain does not operate artistically like this. But gosh, I have so much respect for those who like do this and who can. And I just think it's so fascinating. And to hear you say that, I mean, I from my experience, I agree completely. And I just think it's such a beautiful space. And I'm just so glad to again have the opportunity to speak with you. Iconic show, great job. I'm so
Thank
excited
you.
for everything that's to come, and I'm sure we'll continue to see seasons of this show. It's been so successful for so many reasons, and it's a pleasure speaking to you for sure.
You too. Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, it's we are, all of us will just talk about the show until
Yeah.
nobody wants to hear about it anymore, or until we lose our voices. Like we just love it so much,
Yeah.
and we love the team that we have and the cast that we have, and it's, yeah, it's a wonderful, it's a dream come true, that show. And the way it's been received by fans is also just
Oh yeah,
so
absolutely.
amazing for us.
Well, I just want to say thank you again so much for speaking with us. Congrats on everything, and hopefully we get to reconvene again soon. Hopefully for a season 4. That'd be great.
Yeah, yes,
See
I
what
would
we get
love
into.
it.
Thank you.
Thank you.